So when it comes to getting lean, what's the first areas that a cyclist should focus on?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, keep in mind that when it comes to body composition with endurance athletes, it's a very highly individualized process. So, I mean, anything that I'm going to say here is not going to be like a blanket advice for like every single person that's going to work. But from what we typically see with athletes that we work with, we will usually start with making sure, one, that they're getting enough protein. We want to make sure that when we do put them at a little bit of a calorie deficit, that we still are getting enough protein to maintain that strength. Because a lot of people, when they restrict and try and diet to lose weight, they will often see their strength and performance decline during that process. And then they get kind of frustrated and they're in this kind of yo-yoing and roller coaster of trying to lose weight and perform well. And so making sure first and foremost that we're seeing adequate protein throughout the day, breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks. We're trying to get in enough protein to maintain, if not help build some muscle during this process too. Because sometimes when people have taken, an extended period of time off from racing, maybe they've seen some weight gain, but they also might have lost some strength as well. So, anywhere from 1.5 to 2 grams of protein per kilo is usually the range that we look at. But we'll also kind of see like what are they currently eating for protein? Where do they need to be? And do we have a really big gap? Okay, then let's start kind of slowly working their way up. Because if they're going to all of a sudden overnight increase their protein greatly, that might be a little overwhelming for them. And we kind of need to work with them in what's doable first and then kind of build up to what's optimal. Then the other thing that we might look at is timing of nutrition. A lot of athletes tend to not eat enough during the day. And what we find is that they end up kind of binging or not making the greatest choices later on in the day in the evening hours when they're more tired. Yeah, Netflix, they're just kind of feeling the munchies and they're kind of grazing throughout the evening. And so if we can really nail down a good routine during the day, I had a cyclist just yesterday who had a really significant like breakfast and lunch, and he messaged me in the evening. He's like, yeah, I'm not really that hungry this evening. I'm like, yeah, it's probably because you've already like pretty much hit your nutrition needs for the day and you're just satisfied and ready to go to bed and relax for the evening. So I think front loading the nutrition is another common one that we work with our athletes on, because earlier in the day we tend to make a little bit better choices, and during the day is when we're most active. So we're able to actually use that energy that we're taking in to fuel our day as well.
So would you classify this as a body recomposition, or is it a cut, or does that classification even matter?
I tend to just use the term like body composition because I don't like the term weight loss. It kind of has a negative connotation to it. People associate that with like dieting and restricting, and I like to think of, especially for athletes, as like, okay, when you say you want to lose weight, what you mean is you want to lose that body fat, you want to lower that body fat percentage, and you want to maintain, if not put on, some muscle. And so we really are adjusting that body composition first and foremost before we actually focus necessarily on just weight loss itself.
So the second part you mentioned was protein intake. I think you gave an upward limit of 2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. How does that sit into the overall macronutrient distribution for the day? Is that like 25%? Is it 50%? What does it look like?
It's usually around 25%, give or take a little bit in there. Typically is what we see, anywhere from like 25 up 30%. We can go that route, but we'd also have to make sure that they're getting enough carbs to support their volume of training. If you're in more of an off season, we can lower the carbs a little bit, but if you're in that higher, volume training, we want to make sure that we're getting adequate carbs as well, just to support performance. So there's a bit of a fine balance there, and we might work on timing of things. Like if you're on more of a recovery week, we can dial things back a little bit there versus, in a really like peak training week where you're having some pretty heavy, long, hard training blocks. We'd want to make sure that we're not stressing out the body or putting yourself at risk for injury in that as well. So we can get a little strategic with timing.
That makes sense. And that protein range you mentioned from, I think it was like 1.4 to 2 grams. What determines if I'm sitting at the top end or the bottom end of that range? Should I be looking to hit higher to that range, closer to the top of the range? If I'm doing a gym session that day, if I'm doing a bike session that day, as opposed to a recovery day?
Yeah, I think it's nice to have a range so that you're not trying to shoot for like an exact number where you're like obsessing about your food. Sometimes I'll just kind of look at like what's 1.8 and kind of shoot for like that ballpark. But if you're at like 1.5 and you're trying to, improve that body comp, you're trying to put on some muscle, I would try and see if you can increase it up to 1.8 to 2. But it's certainly like I said, it's kind of one of those things like what's most doable for you to be consistent with it. Like if you really struggle to do 1.8 to 2 and it's just not consistent for you, then don't beat yourself up about that. Like don't like give yourself anxiety because you feel like a failure and you feel like you're not successful. Like 1.5 to 1.8 is still great. So that's where it depends on the athlete and what's doable for them in their schedule.
And do we have a changing protein need as we age? If you contrast an athlete in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s.
Yeah. What we've found in the research is that, in our 20s, we tend to absorb protein really efficiently. Whereas when we get into more of those masters athlete category and, above, we will see that we don't absorb that protein quite as well. So you might need to consume just a little bit more to account for that.
I've just slid into that masters category myself.
Did you? I didn't realize it was 35 and up. So when I looked at it, like, I don't know, it was about a month ago, and I go, oh shit, I'm in the masters category. Like brutal, for the past 2 years, it was a gut check. Yeah.
Hurts the
mourning the
self-image.
loss of that.
So given that I'm sliding into this masters category, like, is there anything that I can take to enhance my protein uptake absorption wise?
I think with there was a research study done on like plant-based protein, and we actually don't absorb all of the protein from like plant-based sources because of all of the fibrous like matrix of plants. Our body isn't able to fully break those down and get all of that protein. So if you're more of a plant-based eater, you might need to especially up that protein intake for sure to like 2 grams per kilogram, which is tough for like vegan vegetarians, but you might not be absorbing all that protein from there just because of the complex, like that matrix of the plant itself is hard for our body to break down and digest. And
I remember chatting to someone, I can't remember if it was off air or on air before, but if you look at humans, so you take someone that plays Halo on the couch all day, they eat Cheetos, they're human, but they're a bit of a slut, right? They haven't got, their muscle composition is terrible. They're overweight. They struggle to walk down to the stairs to get the takeaway. You contrast them at one end of the spectrum to some of the top athletes, a Tadej Pogacar, Usain Bolt, whatever. Like, they're the same species, but are they the same species? They're like almost totally different. Is protein like that? If I have a factory farmed salmon who's just in there slotting around with another 10,000 salmon swimming on them, there's surely a difference that I'm wondering how we measure it between that and a wild caught salmon who's fighting off predators and who's swimming against tides and currents and figuring out how to survive in Darwin's world that he set up where survival's quite tough and only the strongest survive. What's the difference between eating those two types of proteins on our body?
Honestly, I don't know if there's really that big of a difference in the protein itself. I mean, with the farm-raised fish, I know that they're given a little bit different diet, so they might be raised a little bit differently, but I don't think our body can identify like, oh, this is a wild-caught salmon versus
But like, have you ever eaten like wild elk or something? Like, you don't feel the same after it. Like, you feel like this is something that's been fighting for generations to stay alive. Like, it feels like I'm after eating
I don't know if I've ever felt that way. I don't know if I've had elk. I probably have had elk before, but like I've had venison before, like deer meat, and I don't know if I've ever felt that way.
I want to see the data on this. I want more. We're gonna get more
maybe
studies
that's
on
the
this.
placebo effect of you just feeling like like a man, like, oh, I ate some elk. Or...
Hey everybody, let's take a quick break to talk about the bike I'll be riding this season, Reap. I've been lucky enough to ride all the top brands in the world over the past few years, but these Reap bikes, they're not the same, and I'll tell you why. Reap is the first company I've seen that isn't chasing sales targets and the mass market. They're chasing something very rare, perfection. Every bike they make, it's crafted in the UK factory, and it's not about slapping a Made in Britain label on a bike from a Chinese factory. It's about control. From the first sketch to the final build, they're hands-on, ensuring that every detail is dialed in. That's very rare in an outsourced world of mass production. What sets them apart is innovation. While others pump out the same old designs, Reap's pushing boundaries. They're not following trends, they're setting trends. Think precision and performance, like an F1 car for the road. Absolutely no compromises. And it shows, and you can feel it when you ride the bikes. These bikes are built for riders who demand the best, whether they're chasing podiums or just want a machine that feels like an extension of your body, a piece of art. It's not hype, it's substance. Ride a Reap for yourself and you're riding something crafted with intent. So if you're serious about cycling, check them out. It's reapbikes.com. I absolutely love my one and I couldn't recommend it highly enough. Back to the show.